When reporting the health data, you often have to take reasonable steps to de-identify the information, and one of the steps is to hide or suppress the smaller numbers. Let's see how we can do that in the gtsummary package using the table summaries. We'll be using these libraries: gtsummary, dplyr, forcats, and reader. And now let's create some sample data. In gtsummary there is a trial dataset, and I've called that into another data frame called df. So you can see the data on the screen. Let's say if we have to report the ages or the age distribution of the patients who take those trials. So I'm going to divide the ages into different groups. It is also called binning. So here we go. I've created a band or a bin of 10 years. So starting from 0 to 10, 11 to 20, and so on. And let's call it as age group. And if none of the above conditions match, then we can put an NA. So let's run this command and see what happens. So we have a age group column which has the appropriate labels, and some of them have NA also because the age was missing. If you want to know more about the binning techniques, we have plenty of videos. So the next step would be to create a table summary using the gtsummary package. I'm going to use the table summary, and I'm going to include the treatment and the age group so that we can report on the age groups of people taking two different treatments. So if I run it now, what happens? We simply get a nice table summary for drug A and drug B, which are two different treatments, and the age group. But that's not how we want the data to be organized. I would want to compare the age groups by the treatment. So I'm saying by equals treatment, and suddenly our table summary changes. We can see drug A and drug B in two separate columns, and the age group is reported. And you can see that some of the age groups have very few patients in there. And for the reason of data privacy and confidentiality, we might have to suppress those small numbers. Now the question would be, what is a smaller number? Do you want to consider 5 as a small number or a 10 as a small number? 5 is a good starting point. If you are seeing this table summary command for the first time, then we have a detailed video on how to create table summaries. So within this gtsummary package, there is a command called show header names. But before you use that, you would have to create an object first. So instead of printing it on the screen, I'm just putting this into a table called T1. And now I can pass the value of T1 into the show header names. So this is the internal structure of our table. So it has a label characteristic, stat1, which is a column, stat2, which is another column. So let's make use of that and see what happens next. Now we have a reader package also, and I'm using the reader package not to import any data files or anything, but to have a very efficient technique to pick the numbers from this text. See how this text has a formatted text. It has a number, it has a percentage. How do I pick the number 3 in this? So there is a neat technique to do that. Parse number. So if I pass this string to it, see what happens. It has picked up the number 3 from it. Even if our string is a bit more complicated, something like this, it'll still pick up the number 3 from it. So that's a nice functionality to use. So let's start creating our script for how to handle those smaller numbers. So I'm going to use the modified table body command, and remember that we had a stat1 and stat2 columns. So I'm going to tackle the stat1 first. So I'm saying mutate the stat1 column, and all we need to do is scan each value or each value available in that column, and if the number happens to be below a threshold, which could be 5 or it could be 10, you'll simply replace it with something which we can control, for example X or question marks or tilde or whatever. So let's try to run this command and see what happens. Yes, I can see that all the smaller numbers than our threshold, which was 5 in this case, has been replaced by XXX. Now let's try changing it, and I'm changing that to less than 10, and you would see again just on the stat1 column, which was the drug A column, it has replaced it by XXX. But we still need to do the second column, which was the stat2 column. We can simply replicate the whole statement for stat2. So here we go with stat1 and stat2. We can see that our table is working fine. All the numbers have been replaced, smaller numbers have been replaced by XXX. And of course we can control what our threshold is going to be. Let's say if I add another column in that called add overall, what happens now? Suddenly we will end up with having another column, overall column, but the smaller numbers are not suppressed. And the reason is that if I go and show header names, I have a stat0 column, which is the overall column, so we have to tackle that as well. So depending upon the factors in your variable, you might have to tackle more than 2 statistics or more than 1 statistics. So stat0, stat1, stat2, 3, 4, etc. So it's simply a matter of checking and then handling it appropriately. So if I run it now, all honky-dory. Overall column has also been fixed properly with stars. So the next step would be to let everybody know that we have actually suppressed the smaller numbers. Less than 10 numbers have been suppressed. How do we do that? We simply put a footnote at the bottom of the table. And this is how I'm going to do that. So I'm saying modify the footnote, and for all the stat columns, because it's applicable to all stat0, stat1, stat2, so saying if the numbers are smaller than 10 have been suppressed. So we can see that we have a nice footnote there. Now there is another way of handling it, and there's another technique, and we have a bit more control in this technique. So this is called modify the table styling, and then we can specify for which rows we want to modify it. So the rows which contain the smaller numbers are these rows, or the labels of these rows are 0 to 10, 11 to 20, and so on. So using these 4 rows, and I need to specify it manually the way I'm doing it now, and then you say, okay, for these labels I want to have the footnote called less than 10 numbers are suppressed. So if I run it, you would see that there's a superscript for those 4 rows, or the labels of the rows there, and then appropriate footnote has been placed at the bottom. I hope you found this information useful and practical. Thank you very much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.